Hello and welcome to the extra episode of my trophy guide for NIER AUTOMATA. This video is not required to go through the guide. It simply serves as a section where I can share some information about the run to keep each episode as short and packed with content as possible. Ignoring some details there and discussing them here instead will make that a lot easier. But of course you can always use the comment section of the respective episode. I generally answer questions within the day. First, I will give some general information about this game. Personally, I give this game an overall difficulty rating of 1 out of 10. Note that this only covers the gameplay itself. This game is very punishing when it comes to how it saves progress between chapter select. Not saving at certain points can cost you hours of progress. I will go into further detail about this shortly. Also know that, while the lowest difficulty setting makes it so easy the game basically plays itself, level differences matter a lot, and you will still struggle immensely against enemies multiple levels above you. That's where we come to our next point, the grind. I will no longer give ratings for the amount of grinding required. Instead, I will simply state the approximate amount of time spent, which for this game is about 5 to 6 hours. We will take roughly 4 hours grinding for levels. This has several reasons. We will spend 2 of those hours halfway through the first playthrough grinding out level 50. My reasoning here is that we are severely underleveled at that point. While playing efficiently means we are very fast, it also means we kill very few enemies and therefore level up slowly. As I said before, being just a few levels slower than the enemy will severely increase the amount of time it takes to kill them. Leveling to level 50 makes the remainder of the first playthrough trivial. We will then spend 2 more hours right after finishing the final playthrough to grind out level 80. There are 2 fights in the game against level 99 bosses, the first of which will eventually use a certain death move if you do not kill him fast enough. Level 80 is fully sufficient to take him down, however. Note that these 4 hours of grinding can be done while AFK and do not require any further inputs. More about that during the guide. The final 1 to 2 hours will be spent fishing, farming pure water and resetting for rare enemy spawns. This time window is much more variable, as you might get more or less lucky than me. Thanks to chapter select, there is no point throughout the story after which you can no longer obtain certain trophies. However, there are still ways you can accidentally and permanently make trophies unavailable, requiring you to create a new save file. The first of these is the Supreme Support Weapons trophy. To obtain this trophy, we have to fully upgrade all 3 pods. This requires several items, some of which can only be obtained a finite amount of times. Selling those items will make the trophy impossible to obtain. Additionally, one of the power-up parts S is dropped by the Courageous Brother enemy. Not picking it up and then defeating the Hateful Sister and Vengeful Child enemies will prevent the Courageous Brother from respawning and makes that item permanently unobtainable. It is therefore extremely important that you always pay close attention and follow the exact steps I follow in the exact same order that I do them. The only other trophy that can be made unobtainable is called Transcendent Being, which we obtain for viewing all 26 endings. One specific ending requires us to die during a battle that becomes permanently inaccessible after successfully completing it. You must therefore get this ending during your first fight with him and then defeat him during your second try. There are no multiplayer trophies and using cloud saves is not useful during this run. However, there are still multiplayer aspects to this game, and one trophy is much easier to obtain while connected to a network. When playing online, you will see the corpses of other players who have fallen in battle. Collecting their corpses gives you a few items and fully heals you. We have to collect 100 corpses to obtain the trophy Cherish Our Resources. There are NPC buddies you can collect, but those are extremely rare. Additionally, there is one spot with so many player corpses that you cannot even collect them all before the server refreshes and replenishes the buddies, enabling you to farm all 100 corpses at once. More about that during the guide. For this guide I have 3 times to share with you. I have recorded the entire run, which in the end took me just under 17 hours. I then removed all loading screens and got a time of just under 16 hours. The run you will see is just over 10.5 hours long, as I have also removed all grinding sections. I will still upload the original 17-hour run without any commentary after the final episode airs. Now, there are a few more things I want to elaborate on before we start. First, I want to talk about the process of saving and quest progression throughout Chapter Select. First and foremost, this game does not have autosaves. That means when closing the game, your progression will be reset to the last point where you manually saved. Additionally, you can only manually save at certain points and locations within the game. It is therefore extremely important that you save often. Not only in case you want to take a break, but also because the game is very likely to crash at least once or twice while you play. In the 245 hours I spent playing this game, it crashed 22 times, which comes down to more or less one crash every 10 hours. However, the vast majority of those crashes occurred within the city ruins. Whatever is going on there, it seems to not affect any of the other areas. Now, there is an additional reason why I wanted to talk about saving. After we have played through all 3 story paths, we unlock Chapter Select. This lets us go anywhere in the story with our current character. All weapons, materials, collectibles, etc. will carry over to that chapter. But this is where it gets a little funky. If you enter any chapter, collect materials, and then enter a new chapter, all of your newly collected materials will be gone. That is because entering a different chapter does not automatically save your progress, and so, upon entering the selected chapter, your character will be reset to the last time you saved. That is, unless you reset the chapter by choosing the same chapter you are currently in. You will keep your items in that case, but note that this still does not save your progress, meaning you will still lose all new items whenever you eventually enter a new chapter without saving. Of course, all this can easily be circumvented by just saving before selecting a new chapter. But I wanted to highlight this because forgetting this simple step can and will cost you hours of progress depending on where you forgot to save. I will of course always tell you when to save while going through the guide, but now you know why it is so important to follow my steps closely. You can also always save more often than I do. Just do not save less often. Lastly, let me talk about how side quests work throughout Chapter Select. This game features side quests, which are a series of steps you have to complete to obtain a reward. All 60 side quests in the game are only available during certain chapters and with certain characters. Progressing through the story past certain points will make side quests inaccessible, but they can always be restarted by selecting any chapter during which they are available. So any side quest, even if started and failed, will be available again when restarting the correct chapter. That said, when using Chapter Select, all uncompleted side quests will fully reset. Saving does not impact side quest progression, and it does not matter if the quest is active during the newly selected chapter. Even though you are still able to complete them, you will have lost time and potentially materials or money required to progress the side quest. This is just another reason why it is extremely important that you follow my steps exactly. Next is the topic of unit data. We obtain unit data for enemies, NPCs, etc. by completing certain tasks and actions. There is 187 unique unit data in the game, which is accompanied by a percentage tracker visualizing progress. We need to reach 80% progress to obtain a trophy, but throughout this guide we will actually need a total of 95% progress to complete a certain side quest. This results in us having to unlock 178 unique unit data. There are 4 ways to obtain unit data. Let's go over all of them. First, destroying most enemy types for the first time will unlock their unit data. This is the simplest and most straightforward way of obtaining it. However, there are a certain few enemy types where this does not apply. For example, all 4 enemies under the EMP attack category will not get classified as such until after they have performed an EMP attack. That means that even if you know that an enemy is of the EMP attack category, you will not obtain its unit data for destroying it if it has not performed an attack to identify itself as such. There are also certain enemies that will simply not give you their unit data. The amusement park rampaging medium biped unit data only gets unlocked by destroying one of its 2 instances within the amusement park. Killing the other will never unlock the unit data. Similarly, I have to this point not been able to find out how to obtain the unit data for the enhanced small biped. I know of countless locations where they are guaranteed to show up, but never have I ever obtained their unit data for killing them. That is why it is extremely important that you always check your unit data when I tell you to. Because even though I point out all optional enemies I want you to kill, it is still possible that you simply do not obtain their data. And while this in itself is not a big deal, you can just pick up the data later, you still want to know which data you missed. Because otherwise you will reach the end of the guide and then have to check all 178 pieces of unit data to find out which one you missed. Now, for completeness sake, let's go over the remaining 3 ways to obtain unit data. First, there is one additional instance in which you won't obtain unit data for killing enemies. During certain side quests, unique enemies will appear. You will never obtain their unit data upon destroying them. You will always obtain their unit data by completing the corresponding side quest instead. This is also how you obtain unit data for certain entities that you cannot kill or even fight for that matter. Similarly, you will obtain the unit data for certain enemies that appear throughout the game after you have reached a certain part of the story, instead of immediately after you defeated them. I will of course only ever ask you to check on unit data after the point you could have obtained it. And lastly, there is some unit data that is unlocked by simply conversing with certain individuals, like some of the peaceful machines in Pascal's village. Now let's talk about fish. Like any good game, this one also has a fishing minigame, and we have to catch a total of 20 unique fish to obtain the trophy around by the pond. There are a total of 41 fish in the game. Note that all that matters is that it gets catalogued in the fishing encyclopedia. That means all kinds of trash we can fish up also count towards the trophy. Now, there are 10 unique fishing tables, meaning that all fishing spots in the game determine what fish you can catch by using one of 10 probability charts. First we have the city. Both the ravine underneath the bridge leading to the forest area and the deep cave leading to Emil's home have unique tables. Every other fishing spot draws from a third city ruins table. The desert has 2 tables, one for the oil field and one for the oasis. Both sewers, the one to the amusement park and the one to the flooded city, use the same table. The amusement park and the forest kingdom use their own respective table for the entirety of that area. And lastly, the flooded city uses 2 tables, one for fishing near the missile launch platform and one for everywhere else. The way we will approach fishing will allow anyone to catch exactly 20 fish while only catching the most common fish in just 4 of the 10 locations regardless of RNG. First, let me explain my choice of the 4 different locations. My first instinctive idea was to find a threshold to reach at each location, after which we go on to the next location instead of catching every fish, since some of them are extremely rare. For example, when looking at the city ruins table, there are 7 kinds of fish we can catch, but one is exceedingly rare with just a 2.22% catch rate. Since we only need a total of 20 unique fish, it would be much more efficient to move on after just catching some of those fish. So my idea was to only keep fishing until the combined catch probability of all remaining fish dropped below 25%. And to further eliminate randomness as much as possible, I would only add together the most common probabilities to simulate the outcome of the worst case scenario, meaning the least amount of fish you could possibly catch with this method. Now that we have the worst possible outcome for the city, let's continue with the other locations. While listing those, I also started a list on which I noted down every unique kind of fish to see what the total would be. In the end, I reached a list with a total of 22 fish. That means that with a threshold of 25% remaining, we would get more than the required amount when getting the worst possible luck. The next step was to eliminate duplicates. As you can see, the cave, oasis and amusement park only feature fish that we already caught in the city ruins. Additionally, the ravine and forest kingdom feature fish caught in the city ruins and the sewers. This leaves us with only 5 locations which would reach the same total of fish. But remember, we only need 20 fish. So we can also eliminate the missile launch platform as it only adds the basking shark and basking shark machine. With this we now have the optimal outcome. However, this still leaves us with 2 problems. First of all, some of these locations still feature duplicates. As you can see, the tire is included in both the sewers and the flooded city. Since it is more common in the sewers, it would therefore be optimal to ignore it at the flooded city and only go for it within the sewers. Of course, you might still get it in the flooded city, but just in case you don't, saving it for the sewers would then save time. Now, due to how I routed the game, we will actually fish in the sewers first anyways. So this problem will not arise as you will always reach the flooded city with the tire already obtained. So you would always ignore it there. However, we will reach the oil field much later than the flooded city, as we only even go near it during a side quest much later. The starfish machine, blowfish machine and bream machine are more common in the oil field but can also be obtained in the flooded city. So instead of the 10 listed fish at the flooded city, we actually only want to catch 6 of them and leave the other 4 to the sewers and oil field. However, this leads us to the other problem. Even though this covers the worst possible outcome, everyone's actual results will still differ due to randomness. And that means that every individual scenario still leaves room for optimization. Again, there are 2 possible consequences to catching a fish that is not on our list. First, if you catch a fish that is not on the list for the current location, but is on the list for a later location, then it changes very little. We simply strike it from the list of the place we have yet to visit. If, for example, we catch a carp machine in the city ruins, we simply no longer have to get it in the oil field. But let's say we get really lucky and fish up the machine lifeform head. This would give us an entirely new entry and would therefore allow us to strike any of the originally listed fish from any of the tables. In that case, it would of course be most logical to remove the fish with the lowest catch probability, as that would have the biggest chance of eliminating the most amount of time spent. However, in practice, we would actually want to keep fishing for all of the listed fish and simply leave out the last one that remains. Next, I want to briefly talk about Emil. Specifically, the items he can have in stock, as there is a vast variety of misinformation about it online. If you have played this game before, then you might know that Emil is a vendor who appears halfway through the game. You might also know that he can have different items in stock. You will first find him near the desert camp access point. Here he will first sell a bunch of plug-in chips. Let's call this stock A. Quitting out and talking to him again will then continuously have him sell common materials. Let's call this stock B. He will never switch back to stock A until you do the next step. After purchasing any one item or more from him, he will then disappear from this spot permanently, and every time you reload the game, there are 3 different scenarios that can occur. After testing this for hours, it seems that scenario 2 is most likely, with the other 2 being equally less likely. I do not have the actual probabilities, so of course take this with a grain of salt. Scenario 1, he does not appear at all. Scenario 2, he appears near the data access point City Ruins near Factory. Note that I am talking about the initial spawn point, since from there he will travel around the City Ruins. If you want to identify this route, then the easiest way to check is to open your map right after you fast traveled. In this scenario, he can have either stock A or stock B. Reopening his shop does no longer change his stock, and the chances for both assortments seem evenly split at a 50-50 chance. Scenario 3. He appears in front of the resistance camp. From there he takes a much smaller route around the city ruins. He now has a chance to sell either stock A or stock C. Stock A seems more common, albeit not by much. Stock C features 2 weapons and a variety of rare materials. Online you will find many sources debating additional unlocking requirements for stock C. That you have to progress certain side quests up to a certain point, that you have to make him stop right in front of the entranceway to the resistance camp, that you have to read a certain mail he sends you, and more. None of that is correct. It is literally just a matter of luck. During this guide I access stock C without progressing any of his quests, without reading the mail, and stopping him far away from the entranceway. What do we learn from this? Do not trust websites like Extra Life or Fandom. They will be generally right about basic stuff, but will never fail to disappoint when it comes to anything slightly in depth. That sums up all I wanted to say before we get into the game. Following is a little showcase of all the trophies. With that, I hope you enjoy the run, and I will see you later.